Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, traveling to the United States for 48 dynamic hours. First, to address a very sympathetic audience, AIPAC, in Washington. 16,000 people rising to their feet to applaud the Prime Minister several times as he anticipates his speech to the Congress, which happened in these last hours. A packed house, hardest ticket to get. Super Bowl is easy compared to this ticket. However, the address spoke to the fears that the state of Israel has, given all these years of existential threat by the Iranian regime and its agents. The Prime Minister pointed to the deal evidenced by the Obama administration, the National Security Advisor Susan Rice, the President of the United States himself in an interview with Reuters the day before. A deal that is said to be in train in the conversation in Geneva, Switzerland right now by the Secretary of State John Kerry and the Foreign Minister of Iran, Mohammad Javad Zarif. The Prime Minister said to Congress, if the deal now being negotiated is accepted by Iran, that deal will not prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It will all but guarantee that Iran will get those nuclear weapons, lots of them. In response, within the hours after the Prime Minister's address and following the President's evidence that the deal will include a 10-year freeze of the suspect's secret nuclear weapons program in Iran, followed by perhaps a 5-year transition, in which we're told by the President that there will be opportunity to inspect and verify Iran, since it has a decades-long history of deception with regard to its predation and its nuclear weapons program. The Foreign Minister of Iran, the man I mentioned who's negotiating with the Secretary of State John Kerry, has responded to the President by saying that the President's offer of a 10-year freeze is unacceptable. That's the word, and I will read the quote. Iran will not accept excessive and illogical demands. This is a quote in the Fars news agency, which is the Iranian official agency. Obama's stance, said the Foreign Minister, is expressed in unacceptable and threatening phrases. I welcome Lee Smith of the Weekly Standard, who writes often on the conflict in the Middle East, and especially the threat of Iran. Lee, a very good evening to you. It is hours since the Prime Minister's address. He was heartily welcomed and cheered often and applauded by the members of Congress, both sides of the aisle. All the visitors' galleries were filled with dignitaries and VIPs. I won't ask you about how he did, because I could see by the applause he did very well. The question is, the Obama administration, the president in particular, why is it pressing for a deal that right now is so controversial, to say the least, and is so negative to be measured by the state most threatened, which is Israel? Good evening to you, Ali.
Good evening, John. Thanks very much for having me, as always. Why is the president so intent on pushing through this deal? That's part of the mystery. I think that, the administration has made the case starting last year. This comments we know of Ben Rhodes talking to what he believed was a closed audience, where he said that this was the foreign policy initiative that was the equivalent of the Affordable Care Act, meaning it was a vital interest of the administration to push this through. Look, I think that one of the things that we have to look at in the region is that the Obama administration believes it's a wise idea for the United States to draw down its profile in the Middle East. In order to draw down its profile in the Middle East, we have to find someone who's going to do what's known as offshore balancing. In other words, maintain and try to advance American interests. This is, of course, what Israel has done in the Eastern Mediterranean since at least 1973. I believe my contention, and I believe it's quite clear, if we see how the Obama White House has teamed up with the Iranians throughout the Levant, I believe that the administration thinks that Iran will be able to advance American interests in the Middle East. This is basically the exit strategy that the White House has concocted. We're going to leave. We need to draw down our profile. Who's going to maintain American interests? The Iranians are the best are the best candidate.
Iran right now is making a play to be the regional hegemon. It is in action in Iraq civil war, in Syrian civil war. Its surrogates are in action in the Yemen civil war. We have reason to believe it has agents in Khartoum dealing with the Sudanese genocidal government to make a play for destabilizing Egypt and Libya and Tunisia, all across the Maghreb. We know that Iran uses Hezbollah not only to make war in the Syrian civil war, but also to threaten Israel. All of that is in place. The president knows this. It is a puzzle to me why the White House will not respond. That was part of the prime minister's presentation. The nuclear weapon deal will validate Iran's predation.
Yeah. I believe that the administration is hostage to an idea that the nuclear weapon will actually calm down the Iranians. That right now the administration would probably admit, along with you and me and the Prime Minister of Israel, that it is a paranoid and hostile regime. However, a nuclear weapon in its possession will convince it that there will be no regime change from within nor from without, and that will make the regime more normal, and eventually we'll be able to deal with them like a normal state. This is how I understand how the administration sees it. I think it's a preposterous idea, but I believe that this is what they see, how they see the region is going. Look, we also have to keep in mind what really chief political interest right now of the administration is in the Middle East. It's not to stop an Iranian nuclear bomb. They believe, as the Prime Minister of Israel today hinted at, that that is a can that can be kicked down the road. The can that cannot be kicked down the road is the threat of a terrorist attack, a Charlie Hebdo-style terrorist attack in an American city, which would hurt the administration and the chances of a Democrat winding up in the Oval Office in 2017. This is the issue. They believe that the Iranians share the same interest in fighting Sunni jihadis like ISIS, like Jabhat al-Nusra, like Al-Qaeda. That's why they think it's reasonable to team up with the Iranians, even though they would have a problem with Iranian terror, with Hezbollah. Look, we've seen the choice they've made throughout the region. They've teamed up with Hezbollah. The intelligence community has shared intelligence with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Qasem Soleimani is basically running the show into Crete. And the Americans have stepped aside or teamed up with Iranian assets. This is how they see it.
Lee, does this begin a nuclear arms race in the Gulf if Iran is successful at negotiating a deal?
Yes, I think that's inevitable. Unfortunately, I'd like to believe. I'm an optimist. I'd like to believe that it's still possible to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. But I think if it does happen, I think a nuclear arms race is inevitable, given the nature of the region, given the nature of the roster of hostilities between Iran and other actors in the region. Yes, I think that will happen.
Final try here. What does Iran get from this? The sanctions regime right now are being bypassed by a number of sources. Iran is on the advance. You mentioned about the head of the Al-Quds force operating into Crete as if he was an American commander. Right. So why do they need a deal? Why not just continue without it?
Because I think, people say that they want the legitimacy. They want the international legitimacy. But I think much more importantly, I think they're eager to see these negotiations conclude well, because I think they're not going to wait until the next president to break out. Say, for instance, if a number of Republican candidates for the presidency for 2016 say that they will entirely disregard.
Right.
If Obama signs a bad deal, they'll disregard it.
Right. And so,
if that happens, I think the Iranians feel that it's important to break out now and move to a weapon within the next 2 years before Obama leaves office.
Lee Smith of the Weekly Standard. It was a tumultuous day. It will continue. The Prime Minister has made his case to the American people and, most importantly, to Congress. The President has not yet delivered the deal he says is in train and is the most realistic possibility. We wait the details. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.